Ladies and gentlemen, today in the Goela House of Finance, we have Gaurav Mathur. Basically, I'll simplify it for you. आज questions क्या हैं? आज questions are only about gold. Yes, only about gold. Nothing else. क्यों? करेंसी हर जगह डिवैल्यू हो रही है, तो गोल्ड खरीदने का ठीक टाइम है. इन्फ्लेशन हर जगह बढ़ रहा है, क्या गोल्ड खरीदने का ठीक टाइम है? मार्केट्स करेक्ट कर रहे हैं, क्या अभी गोल्ड खरीदने का ठीक टाइम है? यही पता चलेगा आज की वीडियो से. गोल्ड में कैसे इन्वेस्ट करना है, क्यों इन्वेस्ट करना है और कितनी क्वांटिटी में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए, सब पता चलेगा. सो विदाउट एनी फर्दर ड्यू, लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड. Today we have with us is Gaurav Mathur. Gaurav, thank you so much for taking out time for us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Now, Gaurav, you have co-founded SAFEGOLD, right? And we are an audience of young equity investors, right? और मुझे गोल्ड के बारे में आपसे बहुत कुछ जानना है, and specifically right now because अभी currency market, inflation rates, they're all over the place. ठीक है, सबसे बात करते हैं. So, Gaurav, according to you, what do you feel is the biggest misconception around gold जो Indians का है, जो आपके experience में आपने देखा है?
That is a tough question. Globally, there are a lot of misconceptions. India is actually one of the few markets where I'd say it's generally fairly rational. The popular opinion ties into the reality to a fair degree. So it's a little difficult to tell you what the misconceptions are. But I think one of the issues that I would encourage people to think about is that when you buy gold jewelry, people say कि investment भी है और ये durable भी है. The value loss that you have on jewelry makes it a let's say suboptimal investment class. So I would say the only issue that I would leave your audience to think about is अगर आपको investment करना है तो then there are many ways, whether you buy a gold bar or coin or digital gold or gold bond or ETF or whatever. तो आप वो investment में सोचिए. अगर आप ज्वेलरी खरीद रहे हैं तो फिर आप उसको अपने कंज्यूमर ड्यूरेबल, आप आईफोन खरीदेंगे, ज्वेलरी खरीदेंगे, गाड़ी खरीदेंगे, उस विषय में, मतलब look at it in that sense that when you're buying jewelry, okay, of course, an iPhone or a car after 10 years may have close to zero value. Jewelry will hopefully have, as much, maybe more value than you paid for it, but still it's not the ideal investment. I would think of those as two separate areas, and Indians, I think, tend to think of them together. So that is probably the only issue I would say that you should think about.
I agree, क्योंकि jewelry, if you think about it, even और बहुत cases में से मेरी family में भी हुआ है कि बोलते हैं बहुत पुरानी jewelry है, इसकी तो ये value होगी, and when you actually go to sell it and see कि इसकी value क्या है, वो उतनी है भी नहीं जो आप सोच रहे थे, because आधा तो making charge है, and jewelry is like accessory, जो आप सही बोल रहे हो, is not an investment. तो you also mentioned that how people take gold, perceive gold in India and abroad, it's different. उल्टा आपने बोला कि बाहर ज़्यादा है. What misconception have you seen कि बाहर ज़्यादा होते हैं about gold?
तो मैं the very simple misconception is वेस्ट में मैं broadly वेस्ट और ईस्ट में डिवाइड करता हूँ दुनिया को. It's a slightly crude division, but it'll illustrate the point. वेस्ट में gold is generally not thought about or not looked at by a retail investor. And it is जो लोग गोल्ड में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, पेंशन फंड, वो जो मॉडल बनाते हैं ना कि मेरा 5% एसेट एलोकेशन होना चाहिए, मेरे पोर्टफोलियो का शार्प रेशियो होना चाहिए, वो बड़े एनालिसिस के बाद हेज फंड, पेंशन फंड, वो सब डालते हैं पैसा गोल्ड में या गोल्ड ETF में. रिटेल इन्वेस्टर कुछ गोल्ड में डालते ही नहीं है. कभी कभार वो कुछ मतलब कलेक्टेबल कॉइन वॉइन ले लेंगे. सो सिंपली पुट, यू लुक एट स्टेटिस्टिक्स, द इंटायर US consumes maybe 30-40 tons of physical gold in a year. Consumers in the US. India consumes 800 tons, China consumes 900 tons. So मतलब India, China put together consume more than the rest of the world put together many times over. So the East, there are 4-5 countries. India and China account for nearly all of the physical gold demand in the world. बाकी सब वो जो investment आता है, the rest of the world doesn't really think about gold from a consumer point of view.
एक तो अब इसमें मेरी क्वेश्चन है, सबसे पहला, why do you feel कि इतना माइंडसेट में शिफ्ट है? बिकॉज यू राइट, एक इंडियन के लिए सोने से बेटर चीज तो कुछ हो ही नहीं सकती है, राइट? एंड दूसरा ये कि इफ आई सी दैट वेस्ट, मतलब थोड़ा आई वुड कंसीडर डेवलप्ड, ठीक है? नाउ डेवलप्ड मार्केट्स तो आपको कम रिटर्न देंगे, तो टेक्निकली गोल्ड फॉर देम शुड बी अ बेटर ऑप्शन टू इन्वेस्ट रादर देन पीपल इन द डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज जहां पे मार्केट्स में देयर कैन बी बेटर रिटर्न. सो व्हाई डू यू थिंक दिस इज?
अब इसके बहुत सारे डिबेट हैं. मैं अपनी पर्सनल थ्योरी बताता हूँ आपको कि जहाँ पे जो भी देश है जिसमें पिछले 100 साल में, I'd say सोसाइटी मेमोरी 100 साल की होती है, उससे ज्यादा सोसाइटी भूल जाता है 100 साल के पहले क्या होता था. पिछले 100 साल में जहाँ पे बहुत ज्यादा इन्फ्लेशन या हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन हुआ है, वहां गोल्ड खरीदते हैं. तो आप जैसे वेस्ट में एक देश है जो बहुत गोल्ड खरीदता है, वो है जर्मनी. जर्मनी रोज हर साल 150-200 टन खरीदता है. That's the only country in the West that buys serious physical gold. क्योंकि
And if I
जर्मनी में
compare Germany to other European countries तो कितना है, मतलब just to get an idea कि कितना ज्यादा खरीदते हैं.
UK will buy like 20 tons, France will buy 8 tons, like that. और वो नेदरलैंड स्विट्जरलैंड में ठीक है बिकता है, but स्विट्जरलैंड is global wealth management buying gold, तो स्विट्जरलैंड को is not domestic demand, but domestic demand is 10-20 tons in other big European countries. छोटे शहर छोटे देशों में तो 2-3 टन होगा. अब Germany is the only European country in the last 100 years that has been through hyperinflation. In that Weimar era, उसके बाद हिटलर आया, वो बहुत बहुत कुछ घटनाएं घटी उसके बाद, but they had hyperinflation, and after that society said gold was the best store of value. So Germany and Austria have had hyperinflation. Even if you look at China, even look at India, India had many years of very high inflation in the 70s, 80s, 50s. उसके बाद it got entrenched in the sort of psyche, societal psyche कि लॉन्ग रन में गोल्ड अच्छा करता है, क्योंकि जब इन्फ्लेशन हाई होता है तो कोई आपका एसेट नहीं बचता. आपका रियल एस्टेट, इक्विटी, फिक्स्ड इनकम, बैंक डिपॉजिट सब कुछ विल लूज वैल्यू इन टर्म्स ऑफ परचेज. गोल्ड बच जाता है आपका. सो दैट इज माय थ्योरी. जैसे आप एशिया में,
वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग,
अगर आप साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में देखिए, वियतनाम हैज द मैक्सिमम डिमांड फॉर गोल्ड. Vietnam has had the most hyperinflation, not in the last 10-20 years, but before that. So that is why Vietnam is very, very high demand for gold on a per capita basis. So that is why I think through high inflation periods, they tend to have higher demand for gold.
This is actually a very interesting point of view, and yeah, come to think of it, because same as in India, that is why एक perception बन गया around gold कि gold safe है, and people may feel more safer. ठीक है, that's very interesting. ठीक है, अब इसके बाद गौरव की, अब as you mentioned inflation, ठीक है, अभी recently कल ही trading Tommy's reading, US का inflation is clocking at 9.1%. It's crazy, right? India is 7.01%, but RBI had, I think, increased the forecast with 35 to 40% within a span of 3-4 months, और अब तो कुछ ज्यादा ही आया. तो इस टाइम पे when inflation times, ideally gold is the best investment, right? But gold भी नीचे गिर रहा है. So what is your take on inflation and gold? A lot of investors are confused for this.
Okay, so if inflation is sustained over a extended period, by that I mean more than 1 year, if it stays elevated for periods of 3, 5, 6 years like that, that is when gold really outperforms all the other assets. In the short term, and let's take short term as 1 year or less, and I'm just going with statistical correlation. आप पिछले 100 साल का डेटा निकाल लो और आप देखो कि इन्फ्लेशन और गोल्ड के दाम में क्या ताल्लुकात है and all of that. And there are periods where gold has restricted prices and also you have to strip all that out. But when you look at it, less than 1 year inflation and gold, there's no material correlation. If you have inflation for more than a year and the longer it becomes, say you take 5-year periods, then gold and inflation gets very highly correlated, that gold does much better than all the other asset classes. So abhi filhal agar aap dekhenge, inflation has been high, only in the last 4-5 months. It's only since the start of the year. And if you look at the US yield curve, the US yield curve is still downward sloping. So if you look at the short-term rates are right now much higher than the long-term rates, which is telling you that the market is expecting the sort of interest rates and inflation to fall over the next couple of years. They're not expecting long-term inflation to be elevated. If those expectations change, now I don't know if they'll change in 6 months, they may not change, then that's when the gold price will start getting, related to inflation. So it's still early. And right now, gold is moving and, many other things, that interest rates are going up, short-term rates. So in the short term, it's more correlated to interest rates, that as interest rates rise, let's say the negative cost of carry of gold, because gold doesn't yield you anything sort of as a yield right now when you hold physical metal in the rest of the world. Here pe sovereign gold bond hai, to theek hai. But gold is not yielding you anything. So when rates are higher, short-term rates especially, then the opportunity cost of holding gold is a little bit more. So gold price falls. The other thing is, gold is priced in US dollars in the global market, and that flows through. So when they raise rates, the US dollar goes up relative to all other currencies. So to keep gold constant in other currencies, because the demand for gold, physical gold demand is in India and China. So to keep the gold demand constant, the rate ends up falling in US dollars. वो rupees में rate constant रहेगा. डॉलर में हेडलाइन रेट, वो लोग बोलते हैं कि डॉलर में गोल्ड का दाम बहुत गिर गया है, बट इट्स टू कीप इट कांस्टेंट इन अ ब्रॉडर करेंसी बास्केट. सो बोथ ऑफ दोस इफेक्ट्स आर देयर. इट्स स्टिल फॉलन, इवन एडजस्टिंग फॉर द करेंसी मूवमेंट, इट्स स्टिल फॉलन इन द लास्ट 2-3 weeks. But वो short term is honestly, if I knew how to predict it, I'd be a rich man by now. I wouldn't be sitting around doing this. For short term prediction बहुत मुश्किल है इसमें. What is determining the price?
वेरी ट्रू, वेरी ट्रू. लाइक माय डैड सेड दैट कि सिर्फ दो टाइप के लोग हैं जो बताते हैं मार्केट कल कहाँ जाएगा, एक भगवान और एक लायर. तो यू राइट. एंड एक पॉइंट ये भी काफी सही है कि अभी इन्फ्लेशन हैज जस्ट स्पाइक्ड फ्रॉम जैन, मतलब स्टार्टिंग दिस ईयर. तो वी कांट एक्सपेक्ट कि एग्जैक्टली प्रोपोर्शनेटली वैसे गोल्ड पड़ेगा, बट अगर लॉन्गर पीरियड में तो अच्छा होगा. तो सबसे पहला पॉइंट आपका था वो. सेकंड पॉइंट आपका ये भी बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग था कि बिकॉज ऑफ डॉलर वैल्यू, डॉलर की प्राइस फ्लक्चुएशन से इट इज हैविंग इफेक्ट. तो रुपी और जब भी हम खरीदेंगे तो वील हैव दैट इफेक्ट ऑन इट. अब अगर मैं देखूंगा गौरव कि टेक्निकली स्पीकिंग इन्फ्लेशन, एक कंट्री का इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ गया तो द वैल्यू ऑफ द करेंसी शुड गो डाउन. ठीक, दैट्स द टेक्निकल आइडियल एस्पेक्ट.
Purchasing power of the currency will go down.
Purchasing power of the currency will go down, right? तो अगर यूएस का इन्फ्लेशन इज 9.1%, ठीक है, इंडिया इज क्लॉकिंग एट 7.7%.
हाँ.
तो कैन वी सी कि यार रुपी हो सकता है बिकम्स लिटिल स्ट्रेंथनिंग फ्रॉम हियर? इज दैट अकॉर्डिंग टू योर पॉसिबिलिटी? एंड इस पे गोल्ड का क्या इफेक्ट आएगा अगर ऐसा कुछ होता है?
इसमें भी मेरी थोड़ी अलग थ्योरी है कि ये
प्लीज गो फॉर
जो इन्फ्लेशन मेजर करते हैं ना, इंडिया में इन्फ्लेशन इज WPI. That's the common thing. WPI में if you look at the basket, the inflation basket in India and the inflation basket in the US, it is measured little differently. तो वो जो 7% जो उनका है और जो उनका 9% है, हमारा 7% है, वो थोड़ा एप्पल्स टू ऑरेंजेस कंपैरिजन है. मोटा मोटा ठीक है, 60% विल बी कॉमन, 40% विल बी डिफरेंट. तो अगर आप वही कंजम्पशन बास्केट कंपेयर करोगे, माय पर्सनल थियरी, और मैंने डिटेल स्टडी नहीं की, ये थोड़ा मेरा हाइपोथेसिस है, आई डोंट हैव एक्चुअल डेटा टू बैक इट अप, बट फ्रॉम व्हाट आई हैव लुक्ड एट एनेक्डोटली, आवर इन्फ्लेशन आई थिंक इज एक्चुअली लिटिल बिट हायर जैसे हम मेजर करते हैं. एंड that's why I don't think, short point to answer your question, I don't think the rupee is going to appreciate in the short run. It's
buying gold, जैसे अब overall currencies are seeing a downtrend, right? तो जैसे एक article, again economics तो सिर्फ theories ही है as of now, तो जो चल रहा है more of theories ही है, future में क्या होगा. So जैसे I was reading about Asian crisis, ठीक है, जो 97 में so all the Asian crisis currencies came down. A lot of economists are quoting कि possibility है कि we might see something like that. और अब इंडिया भी पूरे foreign trade में तो हो सकता है. तो अगर करेंसीज की वैल्यू नीचे गिरती है और गोल्ड को इसका क्या बेनिफिट होगा? शुड इन्वेस्टर्स बी लाइक अच्छा अपॉर्चुनिटी है गोल्ड के लिए?
So okay, let's answer that in two parts. One is the Asian crisis thing, what is the risk of that and things, and the second is if we were to get into that crisis kind of thing, then will the gold value go up? So the easy answer is if we are in, and it's a big if, I don't think we're going to be there, and I'll explain why. But if we are to get into a crisis, which means that emerging market currencies will depreciate 15%, 10%, which in currencies is a huge movement in a short span of time, within a year, then of course there is a very high chance that gold will outperform. And it will be the most stable asset in a portfolio for people in India if you're in that crisis mode. I don't think we're in that crisis because the hallmark of the currency crisis was countries had huge current account deficits, which were financed by inflows into the capital account. So matlab wo sort of investors were buying, let's say, volatile hot assets, which were equity and property, and itna inflow aa raha tha, so the currency values were appreciating because there's so much capital account flow coming in, and because of that their exports were becoming sort of less competitive and they were running into a huge current account deficit, and consumers were buying more and more imported stuff, exports were less there, and that's what triggered the whole crisis, because suddenly when those capital flows turned, वो ट्रेड डेफिसिट तो सबकी आदत पड़ गई थी कि मैं मर्सिडीज खरीदूंगा, ये करूंगा, वो करूंगा, और वो बाहर फॉरेनर्स का पैसा आना बंद हो गया, तो suddenly currency crashed and you had to put capital controls and all kinds of other crises ensued and things like that. India especially doesn't have free capital account. It has many controls. I think despite FIIs pulling out money last year, we've still been a relatively steady sort of economy. We've, of course, current account has worsened largely because of oil prices. That's there. But I think at least India is in a much better state. We could have some hiccups. Rupee will likely depreciate, and we've got those things. But I don't think we're in crisis mode. But yes, if we are in crisis mode, then, you can go to all the crises over the last 50 years, 100 years. Gold has generally been one of the most steady assets. It may not appreciate sharply, but when everything else falls, gold will generally stay steady or appreciate a little bit.
गौरव, जैसे कि अब हमारे, एंड यू राइट, आई थिंक अगेन दैट थ्योरी वाज वेरी फार फेच्ड कि वी आर गोइंग टू रिलेशन क्राइसिस. वो तो जब डेफिसिट बढ़ेगा तो इशू आएगा ही आएगा. एंड एज ऑफ नाउ इंडिया का डेफिसिट आई फील it's worsened because we crude oil, wheat and dollar वजह से, but controls ज़्यादा हैं. I don't see it's going to get so worse.
हाँ.
अच्छा, अब जैसे अब जो भी यहाँ पे equity investor, right? They're all young investors.
हाँ.
अब सबके दिमाग में एक चीज है कि यार gold, why do I want to invest in gold? What would you want to say to them?
So okay. अब कोई blanket statement on asset allocation is very difficult. So if you're trading with a, let's say, sub 1 year outlook, आपका portfolio, आपका view है for whatever basis you've got कि आपका 1 महीने 6 महीने में जो भी कुछ whatever asset you're buying, then honestly gold is not the best thing to trade unless you have a system or a methodology that you can say that based on some technical indicator next month this is what will happen to prices. If you're an equity trader on the Indian equity markets and your outlook is less than a year, I would say gold is not actually the best asset for you to trade unless you've got some commodity trading skill and you trade commodities and things like that. In the long run, and this is analysis that I'm happy to share also, if you put somewhere between 5 to 15% of your portfolio in gold, it generally has better long run outcomes, which is
long run को define करिए, how many years?
Long run is 3 years plus.
3 years plus.
Between 1 to 3 years, you can have some debate. You may have gold. Less than 1 year, there is no debate. You shouldn't try and trade gold. I mean, it's a trading asset. If you're a trader, you have a view, आप trade कीजिए, but otherwise gold का कुछ role नहीं है. It's a different category. 1 to 3 years, you can have some debate. There's no statistical model I can tell you to say कि यार ये तो आपका फायदा है. But from 3 years to onwards, it is generally now, how do you say, should you have 5%, should you have 15%? Now, even when you look at 10-year returns, depending on the starting point and the end point of 10-year or 20-year returns, you can have some plus or minus. So depending on which 10-year period you're looking at, someone will say put 5% in gold or 15% in gold. And there are many 10-year periods where gold has actually outperformed equities. So in India, not globally, in India. So you could argue there'll be periods, so depending on which long run you're looking at, you should have 15-20% in gold. Otherwise, in other periods, even when gold underperformed equities in 10-year periods, it's never more than 1 or 2 percentage points. And its volatility is lower. And I know you'll be surprised. I'll send you the data after this if you want. And I've got the actual time series for the last 20 years. So you can play around with it.
We'll share it. We'll mention the links below so that everyone can see it.
So you can play around with it. And it's actually, we have day-wise data. So you can look at it and cut it any way you like. And that's what I'm saying. It's you can debate it, but between 5 and 15%, that for a given portfolio return, adding gold to that will always lower your volatility. And depending, and there'll be certain 10-year periods where adding gold will increase your overall returns also. But for a given return in a portfolio, your volatility always comes down when you add a certain amount of gold. So short thing is, if you have an outlook on a portfolio for more than 3 years, then gold certainly helps, improve the performance of the portfolio.
True. And सबसे पहले जो risk management हो, तो obviously it's very specific to persons and their financial needs. So we can't say on this person कितना होना चाहिए. But ideally, if you're holding a 3-year plus portfolio, having 10 to 15% gold, as you mentioned, will help you to reduce volatility and stabilize your returns and even get them better. Right?
True. Absolutely. Spot on.
Gaurav, now what interests me most is actually SAFEGOLD, right? ऐसा क्या problem था that you saw in this industry and you felt, and what problem is SAFEGOLD solving?
I'll give you the honest answer, then I'll give you the marketing answer.
Done.
Okay. So when I started this company about 4 years ago, I was actually very enamored by Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I'd spent a year or two creating tokens and this and that. And about 4 or 5 years ago, what fascinated me actually, and what still fascinates me, is if you look at the concept of a cryptocurrency, and let's take Bitcoin as an example and ignore all the current drama that's happening in the crypto markets. The fact is that everyone gets a unique address. अब कहीं भी जाके अपना wallet खोल लो, address आ जाता है आपको. Now the Indian government has put so many controls and this and that कि most of the exchanges have stopped giving you that. But if you take out the unique quirks of the Indian regulatory system, you have address, and anywhere to anywhere in the world, you आपने address डाला और pretty much immediately वो asset has gone to anywhere else in the world. कुछ बैंक नहीं आया बीच में, कुछ RTGS, IMPS, Swift transfer, कुछ नहीं आता. 3 layers of banks in the middle. ये वो generally हो जाता है, and it's like close to 100% success rate. So that to me was a mind-blowing concept. यार this entire concept of ये credit card, Mastercard, Visa, NPCI, RTGS, bank सब हट गया. And you've got the same utility. In fact, arguably much higher utility for the consumer. So think about what an efficient thing it is. Now, if you look at the concept of a currency, it is just everyone's collective worth of it, right? You print too much of it, like in Zimbabwe or in Afghanistan or wherever else, and that currency very quickly becomes worthless. The US is the one country that's managed to print a ton of it and people still believe in it, but they've got a strong underlying economy, a lot of innovation, this, that, and all. And countries like India are very much on the borderline. I don't think we're anywhere close to a crisis, but you get one bad government that goes crazy over a 5-year period, and suddenly the currency can very quickly depreciate in value and kind of create kind of drastic consequences. So cryptocurrency में कौन सी फर्क है? It's just the collective judgment of a billion people what this token is worth, right? Or even gold for that matter. There's not that much particular utility, right? It's just the collective wisdom of many people what it's worth. So long story, I said that if you create a token that is backed by gold, gold has many more participants in the market. Crypto, as we've seen, is a very narrow segment when you look at it from the world population point of view. So the number of people participating in setting the value of a crypto token is less than some 0.5% or 0.2% of the world population will actually actively trade and set it. So जब जैसे sentiment change होता है, इसलिए वो बहुत ज़्यादा ऊपर चढ़ जाता है, नीचे हो जाता है. Gold is conceptually the same thing. कि it's a people collectively say इसकी value है. But because 5,000 साल से लोग इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं ऐसे as a store of value, there is maybe 5% of the world population that is involved in setting the price of gold, and that simple fact makes it much more stable. And financial institutions, everyone has a view, so it's a very stable. So when I started it, I said, yeah, we should create a gold-backed token. It has the best of both worlds. You've got a digital asset which people can, use. It can be like a global currency. Bitcoin is a global currency also. It's a global currency, and let's make it regulated. You go to every country, say, मैं KYC करूँगा, ये asset है, तो people say इसका value क्या है? You say gold का value है. आप जिम्बाब्वे चले जाइए, वेनेजुएला चले जाइए, अफगानिस्तान, इंडिया, न्यूयॉर्क, सब जगह गोल्ड का एक भाव है. Every local market has a price of gold. You can go anywhere in the world, you'll get a price of gold. It's as popular, if not more, than the US dollar. The US dollar and gold are the only two, let's say, currencies in the world that have a local fiat currency price everywhere. So I thought, अगर gold backed token create करेंगे, तो ये तो दुनिया में you can get it to be used everywhere. So that was the genesis. That crypto is a mind-blowing invention in terms of transferring value from any one person to the other person without any need for intermediary infrastructure. And if you add gold to it, then you've created a potential global digital currency which can replace the US dollar. So
that you get the credibility in the entire backup and the trust, like you mentioned, the majority of trust just with the utility of the crypto and the entire blockchain technology.
Correct. So our platform is built. So I started out. So if you look at our first website, it said gold backed crypto token. But very quickly, we came to the realization that the government of India hates crypto and they hate all the things. India is not the place to do this. वो तो मतलब सरकार तो जेल में डाल देगी if they had their view. But while we had started up, मतलब 2-3 महीने से हमने शुरू किया था this gold backed crypto token and we had blockchain technology underlying. वो सब बनाया था and it was really cool and we were doing other stuff. What we saw was a lot of demand from people who were buying low tickets. और हम वो कस्टमर से फोन करके बात करते थे कि जी हम तो आपको क्रिप्टो टोकन बेच रहे हैं, आप ये 100 रुपए का क्यों खरीद रहे हो, या क्या? We used to just call customers to find out. हम तो क्रिप्टो टोकन बेच रहे थे. And what we stumbled upon then was कि a lot of people say कि यार ये जो सोना खरीदते हैं, अगर आप फिजिकल मार्केट में जाओगे तो the smallest piece that you can buy is 1 gram. वो करीब 5,000 रुपए का आता है. अब 5,000 रुपए जो आम जनता सोना खरीदती है, वो 5,000 रुपए थोड़ा हाई टिकट है, और वो या तो 5,000 का खरीदो, नहीं तो 10,000 का खरीदो, या 15,000, मतलब 5,000 के मल्टीपल, 1 ग्राम के मल्टीपल में आप खरीद सकते हो सोना. जैसे ही आपने टोकनाइज कर दिया, डिजिटाइज कर दिया, जो भी बोलो, आप उसको 5 रुपए में ले लो, 500 रुपए में ले लो, 200 रुपए में ले लो, जो भी करना. एंड दैट वी फाउंड वाज अपीलिंग टू अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल. सो द ट्रांजिशन हैपेंड प्रीटी क्विकली दैट वी रियलाइज कि यार ये रेगुलेटरी वाइज इंडिया में तो हो नहीं सकता, और वो करेंगे एक दिन, वो ग्लोबल, लाइक वी हैव अ थाईलैंड सब्सिडरी एंड वी आर गोइंग टू सम अदर कंट्रीज वेयर इट्स रनिंग ऑन द ब्लॉकचेन. सो वी विल डू ऑल दैट, बट दैट्स outside India. India is, I think, we realized that there's a huge market. India is a big market for gold. And we thought that's what will make the cryptocurrency appealing. But the crypto transfer features and all were not what people were buying it for. They were buying it for the fact that you can buy it in small quantities. And that is how we said that, it's essentially वो shampoo sachet कर दिया हमने, gold को sachet में कर दिया. So it's accessible to the mass market. Wow. And सोना अगर आप देखेंगे, ये तो जनता खरीदती है. People who don't have a lot of money are the people who buy gold in big amounts. And for them, getting a lower ticket size makes a big difference. So I think that is the essential problem that we solved to start with. Now there are many more benefits that you get. You can use it as collateral. You can get an instant loan against it. We're starting features where you'll be able to deposit it under that gold monetization scheme. So you can earn interest on your gold. It's not sitting idle in an asset. You can send it as a gift. We've tied up with lots of jewelers. You can walk into a jeweler and you can exchange it for jewelry. You can go to Tanishq and get jewelry for it. So wow. आप ये समझिए, अगर आप एक सोना का सिक्का खरीदते हैं, तो जैसे
हाँ
आपने 10 ग्राम का सिक्का खरीद लिया या बार खरीद के अपने अपने, आप 4 चीजें कर सकते हैं उसके साथ. यू कैन एट सम पॉइंट यू कैन सेल इट. आप वो 5 साल बाद ले जाओ, बेच दो, पैसे मिल जाएंगे आपको. यू कैन कन्वर्ट इट टू ज्वेलरी, you can gift it, or you can use it
या
as collateral for a loan. All
हाँ
those 4 use cases for a coin you can do faster, better, cheaper with digital gold. And it's essentially India buys 150 tons of gold coins every year, gold coins and bars. And when you buy a small coin, especially आप 1 ग्राम का पैसा भी दोगे, उसके ऊपर वो जो मेकिंग चार्ज लगता है वो सब दे हुए. And then you have to go, you have to buy it, store it, storage is at risk, all of that. We have made all of the use cases for the coin is more convenient if you buy it digitally. And now we'll add stuff like you can deposit it easily, and you can, so it'll become as easy as an FD that you can, you can buy gold and you can get a yield on it. And then it becomes a very interesting asset. Once you can get a yield on it, it becomes much more interesting than buying it as a dead physical asset in your
true. It becomes much more
cupboard.
appealing from an investment point of view also. काफी easy होता है. अच्छा, वैसे मुझे बड़े सारे interesting question है. सबसे पहला जो आपका point था ना, you're right, because I feel कि बहुत leaders in जो इंडिया के leaders हैं, and not only India, I think बाहर के leaders भी, it's very evident from their interviews कि they don't understand exactly cryptocurrency है क्या. So I feel ये भी है कि they are just hesitant to change, और एक तो ये है कि obviously government does not want to lose control. So do you think this will change, or governments will change themselves, or it will be forced upon them to change? How do you see the future?
So my views, the simple thing is, in the short run, and actually not even short run, in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think any big government can be forced to change. In fact, big governments will actually shut down crypto, but there are many smaller economies, like you take Hong Kong, Singapore. Hong Kong, so take China ho gaya, but you take Hong Kong, Singapore, UAE, all of these countries, even today, effectively don't have monetary policy. They run fixed pegs to the US dollar in practice. For them, cryptocurrency, I think, becomes very interesting, because then why should they are all effectively beholden to the US dollar on their monetary policy. For them, some version of a cryptocurrency will become interesting. And there's a whole range of smaller countries. And so my hypothesis is that over the next 10 years, many of these smaller, highly open trading countries, right, like a Singapore, UAE, they're very open, trade-driven, capital flows, no controls, absolutely. In fact, those nations have been built on openness to trade flows and capital flows. They will sort of embrace this. There will be 1 or 2 cryptocurrencies that will emerge as standards. And then that will take 5-10 years. The big countries will all shut it down because it doesn't make sense for them. And once some alternatives which are government backed and they have all the controls in place and things emerge, those will then, I think, give serious competition to the national currencies. Also, again, going back to the history of currency, so the first paper currency was printed in China. That Kublai Khan printed it. And that's when he just had it that if you don't accept this as a paper note, I will kill you. So that's how people started accepting it. So China is the pioneer in creating paper currency. And for many years, even in the US and things like that, they had multiple issuers. All private banks used to issue paper currency. In fact, if you go to Hong Kong today, 3 banks still print the notes. The government doesn't print the notes in Hong Kong for the currency.
This is
so the history of currency is there were multiple private issuers. Over time, private issuers started going bad, not honoring the currency, having defaults, and public lost money. And that's when the concept of central banking came about, and governments abolished all private issuers of currency. Cryptocurrencies are nothing but private issuers of currency. It just so happens कि कागज की बजाय वो अब डिजिटली कर रहे हैं. पर कॉन्सेप्ट तो वही है ना. तो 200 साल पहले, 150 साल पहले भी हर देश में मल्टीपल प्राइवेट इश्यूअर्स होते थे. एक एक करके सारे देशों ने बंद कर दिया प्राइवेट इश्यूअर. तो अब वो क्रिप्टो करेंसी को क्यों आने देंगे? It has to come up with a much more compelling benefit, which is this: you don't need banks, frankly. If you have cryptocurrencies, bank के तो आपकी जरूरत नहीं है. You'll have institutions that will give you interest. So you'll have specialist lending, borrowing institutions. आप करेंसी अपने वॉलेट में रखो. आपको इंटरेस्ट चाहिए तो आप दिल बी 5 people saying it will be like a mutual fund ना. आप इस लिक्विड फंड में डाल दो, आप इस फिक्स्ड इनकम फंड में डाल दो. That's what will be there. बट नहीं तो बैंक की तो जरूरत नहीं होगी. ये बैंक का जो सारा पेमेंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ये सब तो निकल जाएगा. So I think all the smaller countries will realize that efficiency and will implement it. The big countries will then take, I'd say it's a 10 years plus game before the big countries get there.
But you're right. ये actually concept मुझे इतना ये अच्छे चमका ना कि you're right, क्योंकि starting में जो था कि सब अपने promissory notes print करे जा रहे हैं, फिर centralized हो गया. And crypto के साथ ये भी ultimately होगा ये, because इतने सारे tokens आ गए. It will have to get centralized at some point of time. ठीक है. अब coming back to gold. ठीक है. अब gold में बहुत लोगों का misconception की ना, मतलब अब उनको because they've never experienced it, बहुत लोगों का होता है कि गोल्ड उनको क्या चाहिए, उसमें फिजिकल चाहिए.
हाँ,
फिजिकल गोल्ड चाहिए, डिजिटल
correct.
सेफ है नहीं है पता नहीं क्या है.
हाँ.
सॉवरेन गोल्ड बॉन्ड स्टिल पीपल विल बाय, राइट? बट गोल्ड खरीदने में वो हो जाता है. तो आप जस्ट एक्सप्लेन द बिजनेस मॉडल टू आवर व्यूअर्स की व्हाई इज डिजिटल गोल्ड equally safe and credible.
So first narrow answer for why is digital gold safe and credible, and why is safe gold. So this is the obvious and the correct question for everyone to ask. So when we set up this structure also, we set it up with a what we think is a watertight structure to protect customers. So first is we have a trustee and we have a custodian. So the custodian is the person who runs the vault that physically stores the gold. So it's a company called Brinks. They're the largest safekeeper for precious metals in the world. Even the banks store with them, and also they have these what I'd call the James Bond style vaults with multiple layers of security and full insurance and things like that. So your gold is safe and it's fully insured and stored like in a really high grade vault. That is one. Then there is a trustee. So anytime we sell gold, money doesn't come to us. Money comes to a collection account that's controlled by the trustee. So today you can buy safe gold on more than 100 platforms. You can go to Amazon, Flipkart, PhonePe, Tanishq, Axis Bank, wherever, and you buy safe gold. Wherever you buy safe gold, the money that you pay to buy it goes to the trustee. And every day, the trustee does a check to say कि अच्छा आज आपने से 100 करोड़ का गोल्ड बेचा. 100 करोड़ मतलब 20 किलो का गोल्ड. नहीं 20 करोड़ नहीं 200 किलो, सॉरी 200 किलो का गोल्ड. तो दे विल चेक, हमें पैसे देने के पहले वो कस्टोडियन उनको डेली रिपोर्ट भेजता है ऑफ द वॉल्ट. सो दे विल चेक कि इन्होंने 200 किलो गोल्ड रखा है वॉल्ट में कि नहीं. अगर 200 किलो गोल्ड वॉल्ट में रखा है तभी पैसे देते हैं हमें. अगर गोल्ड नहीं है तो वो पैसे वापस भेज देंगे. आज तक ऐसे हुआ नहीं है. वी बीन ऑपरेटिंग फॉर 3-4 years. We've done 70-80 million transactions, but in theory they would send it back. So the first protection that is there is we cannot get a customer's money unless that corresponding physical gold is placed in the vault. And second is, again, not happened. We don't expect it to happen. But if anything were to happen to us, should we become insolvent or for any reason we cannot service customer requests, customer can go to the trustee and say, "Yaar, mujhe apna sona chahiye." Trustee is authorized to go to the custodian as long as they have a verified customer request, take the gold out of the vault and give it to the customer. So even if we were to disappear, go bankrupt, whatever else, that gold is there in the vault. I cannot do anything with that gold. Customer is the legal owner of that gold. So it is stored in the highest possible grade of security that you've got with full insurance. And it is always, anytime we get money, it is always backed by physical gold. So I think that is the basic, let's say, foundation on which we've built our business. The second thing is about why should you buy safe gold? So physically khareed lu. So one is the lower ticket size. But I think the bigger thing is, see, lots of people buy gold, they buy it for many different reasons. Our thing जो आपने बोला था जो physical चाहिए ना, अगर आपको purely financial reason के लिए खरीदना है, so there are 3 or 4 ways you can buy gold. And it's worth going into who should buy gold in which method. No one will say this is the right method for everyone. True. So, if you have a long-term perspective, and again, long-term is 5 years or more, and you're buying it for a pure financial reason, then there is nothing to beat the sovereign gold bond, because again, you've got sovereign risk. उसमें झंझट नहीं आपके डीमैट अकाउंट में आता है, and you get a yield on it. That yield is okay. They'll pay 2.5% on the face value. So if you assume historical gold price sort of appreciation, by the time you've taken the life of that, it'll be 1.7, 1.6% yield, but it's still a positive yield. The problem is it's not liquid at all. जैसे मेरे sovereign gold bond है, मैं 6 महीने से बेचने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ, because on paper they're worth much more. वो बिकते ही मतलब zero trading volume if you want to sell. So it's just, if you're willing to hold for 5 years, nothing to beat the sovereign gold bond. Great place to be, and with the financial aspect. If you want to trade in the short term, and you don't want physical. Key is you don't want physical, less than 1 year. You can trade futures, you can trade ETF units. They're both great ways to trade gold. You shouldn't be buying digital gold, because digital gold is buying physical. So when you buy it, you pay GST on it. So it's not the product to trade. So short-term trading, do futures or do ETF. Long-term hold, financial perspective, do sovereign gold bond. In the middle, everything is digital gold is the right instrument. So the ideal is, if you want to accumulate, I want the option of physical. I'll want physical at some point, 2, 3, 4 years later. At some point in the future, I'll want physical. Within ETF, that if you sell it, then you'll pay tax on it, then you'll go buy physical, and there'll be an annual holding charge, and there'll be annual fee and all of that. So it's good to trade short term. But if you want physical, then digital is best, because we actually have, digital gold is just digital is a channel. You're actually buying physical. You're the legal owner of that. It's kept in the vault in your name. So at some point, when you want a coin, or you want to go convert it into jewelry or whatever, then we'll send you the coin, or you can go convert it into jewelry at our partner jewelers and things like that. So that is the market for who digital makes sense.
You've answered all my questions. आपको पता है, my first question was कि if something like a situation like what happens, so how can people say कि your platform is trustworthy. You answered
हाँ.
that. उसके बाद मेरा question यही था कि what is the right fit for an ETF
हाँ.
versus solid gold versus digital gold? And you're right. I think the way you explained it makes a lot of sense. कि अगर if you're just thinking on a short-term fluctuation trading basis, so this is not the space for you.
Yeah.
But if you want to collect for a longer period of time with a safe source and you want to invest, want to have the flexibility कि मैं थोड़ा-थोड़ा invest कर सकता हूँ,
हाँ.
वो आपका platform आपको देता है पूरा.
Correct. And once we launch leasing and all that, then you can use it for, or today you can use it as collateral for a loan if you need that, or you want to get a yield on it. वो सब आपको options आते रहेंगे, which are little more benefits than buying physical and keeping it in your cupboard.
This is very, very interesting. Okay, Gaurav, thank you so much. Now, what is that? Is there any last thing that you would want to leave our audience about gold? Because gold के बारे में पढ़ना ना थोड़ा difficult हो जाता है for a lot of people. They want to research on gold, but gold has a lot more tangents to it compared to equity. उससे तभी भी कम है, gold के बहुत सारा है. How would you advise if somebody is interested? यार मुझे gold में I want to take more interest in it. How would you advise कि these are things you should follow to get updates and stay on top of your game?
If there was one source, I'd say there is a site called gold.org, which is the website of the World Gold Council. If there is one site that you want to go to, वैसे देखने को तो आप गूगल करेंगे तो आपको 50-100 मिल जाएंगे. आप gold.org में जाओ, they publish regular research. They're a repository for data. So if you want to go to one place and learn about gold, I'd say go to gold.org. That is the best place to learn about data, and it's reliable, trustworthy data, and it's very sensible research that you get over there. That is the one thing I would sort of recommend to people. And I would say it is, if you're a trader and you can read short-term markets, that's fine. But otherwise, think about it from a slightly longer-term perspective. Don't try and say that over the next 3 months, gold will go up and go down and all. That's a very, very sort of difficult market to predict and very difficult market to play, because it's global macro factors. It's not कि अगर आप अपने local stock HLS देखोगे, you can have a view on India and it's there. But gold has got so many factors that you need to be a really experienced, global macro trader before you can trade it well in the short term. So थोड़ा long-term perspective है, तब आप gold देखिए. Then it's a very good fit for your portfolio.
ठीक है गौरव, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Personally बताऊं, मुझे काफी doubts है जो मैंने आपसे सारे doubts अपने तो clear करवा लिए. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Harsh. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for having me on your show.